so good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, or if you're an old timer coming back for the 100th time, well, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world, and it is particularly exciting because this is February. And so in commemoration of February 11th, the International Day for Women in STEM, we are doing an entire month dedicated to amazing women in science and exploration. I think 50 plus programs. It's going to be a great time. Earlier today, we hung out with Lucy Kemp live from South Africa talking about hornbills. Later today, we get to talk about cheetah conservation. But right smack dab in the middle, we're throwing animal stuff out the window. And we are joined by the Medical Curiosity on Stage team. So this is a student-run organization at the University of Ottawa dedicated to making sure that people like you, classrooms, the general public, understand things happening in the world of medicine so they can make informed decisions to make healthier, happier choices for their life. Now, they joined us a couple months ago. They did an amazing job talking about the heart. We're going to dive in today with COVID-19 and vaccines. Why are vaccines important? How does COVID infect us in the first place? This is, of course, the biggest topic over our last couple of years, and it's really nice that we're in a situation where we have kids back in the classroom to be able to enjoy this program. So, without further ado, Amélie and Isabella, thank you so much for joining us today, and take us away. You're all in the broadcast. Hi.
Good morning, Jesse. Thank you so much for that introduction. So as Jesse mentioned, both Emily and I are both second-year students at the University of Ottawa, and today we are going to be talking to you about COVID-19 and the vaccine.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Amélie, and we're really excited to be able to talk to you today about COVID-19 and vaccines. So let's get right into it. So, a lot of you have probably already seen this picture before. This is what the virus looks like when we look at it under the microscope. So this is what it actually looks like. Even though we can't see it with our eyes, this is what it would look like if you looked at it under the microscope. So first of all, what happens when you get COVID-19? So the coronavirus particles will enter your mouth or your nose and will go down your throat all the way to your lungs. And they will stay there. And they'll make it harder for you to breathe when you run, when you walk, or even when you just sit down or lie down. It also makes you cough. But how does your body respond? It's with our immune system. So we're going to start by talking about what our immune system is all about, what it does, and how it defends us and helps us beat things like COVID-19. So we're going to start off with a little quiz. What kind of cell helps fight against viruses? Is it A, blue blood cells, B, red blood cells, C, yellow blood cells, or D, white blood cells?
All right, what do we think, folks? So our live classes, if you guys want to share in the StreamYard chat, YouTube classes, if you want to share in the chat there, by all means, go for it. Our first answer is D, white blood cells. That's from Mr. Shattuck. I know Miss Sims joining us in Brantford. Do you guys want to throw in your hat in the ring in the chat as well? I don't know. I'm kind of scared of these yellow blood cells. I'm kind of hoping they don't exist. They sound terrifying. But that's our answer. So white blood cells, I think they've got it right. What do we think?
Let's see. You're right. Congratulations. So it is white blood cells. And now we're going to show you a little video that comes from a TV show that I personally really love that explains a little bit what white blood cells do in the body.
The bacteria from Ralphie's throat infection are everywhere, and they're destroying his throat cells. Look, here comes some white blood cells. Whoa, wow. It's throwing stuff at the bacteria. That was incredible. That white blood cell just ate those bacteria. That huge battle is going on inside me? I mean inside Alfie. This battle is raging. Who's going to win? No wonder I'm sick. Arnold here. On location.
So that gave us a little inside scoop of what happens when the white blood cells attack foreign bodies in us. Those foreign bodies could be viruses like COVID-19. They could be bacteria like what we saw in the video. And they could even be things like parasites. Oops. So now we have a little quiz for you. In the video, we saw the white blood cells threw little sticks out, and those sticks stuck onto the bacteria. So my question to you guys is, what do white blood cells release before attacking bacteria or a virus in the body? Is it A, stickers, B, antibodies, C, red blood cells, or D, platelets?
The stickers. I'm thinking stickers. You know what? I'm gonna mess with the system here. Mr. Shattuck's group thinks D. I know we got some groups on YouTube as well. In fact, we got a bunch of people that just joined us after we got in their way. So do you guys want to throw your hat in the ring on YouTube? I know you're about 7 seconds delayed. So I'll give you guys a quick second to do this. The white blood cells are chucking red blood cells. The red blood cells never expect that. Like they pick them up, just go. So D is our platelet one. It's very good. I mean, instinctually, when I'm thinking about blood and healing, I think of platelets. It's one of the things that pops to mind first for me. Nothing coming in on YouTube, so we'll stick with platelets. What do we think?
All right, so platelets is a great guess, but the answer is B, antibodies. So what platelets do is they help us stop bleeding. So if we cut ourselves, for example, they will help form a clot and help the blood stop from flowing outside of our body uncontrollably. What antibodies do is they stick onto things that are foreign to our body. So like I mentioned earlier, it could be a virus, it could be bacteria, it could be a parasite, or anything that isn't supposed to be there. And that kind of acts as a flag. And that flags the white blood cells over so that the white blood cells know what to remove from our body, and so that they won't remove our normal, natural, healthy cells. So what are some ways that we can improve our immunity? Some ways include getting enough sleep, eating wholesome meals and healthy fats, limit the amount of sugar intake, although ice cream is quite fantastic. Avoid processed foods, adding green veggies and fruits to your diet, drinking plenty of water, and exercising regularly.
So now that we know a little bit more information about the COVID-19 virus, as well as how our immune system attacks it, we're now going to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine and how it helps our body stay protected from the virus. So vaccines work kind of like invisible coaches, and they're there to help us train our immune system and teach us how to stay strong and healthy when our body is exposed to the virus. So while some people are just hearing about vaccines now, vaccines are actually made with something called messenger ribonucleic acids, or also known as mRNA. And these vaccines are commonly used for COVID. And mRNA has been studied for decades. And something interesting about these vaccines is they do not actually contain any parts of the coronavirus. So there's no coronavirus in the vaccine. They just contain the little mRNA particles that teach the body to recognize the virus in the future so that when we're exposed to it, we know how to react. So we probably saw this picture before of the coronavirus ball covered in spikes. And the vaccines use the mRNA to teach our body how to make the spikes out of proteins. And these proteins look like spikes on the virus that cause COVID-19, but are not actually the virus. And since our body recognizes the spike shouldn't be there, it produces the antibodies to eliminate the spike proteins. And then the antibodies then remember how to fight the virus. And now some of you, or most of you, may have already had this vaccine, which is helping to produce these antibodies in your body. But when you got the vaccine, they may have told you that you may experience some side effects when getting the vaccine. So our next quiz question to you is, what are some common side effects of the vaccine?
Sore arm, fever, chills, nausea, headaches, all of the above. I can say I'm one of those people that got the vaccine and felt absolutely nothing. A lot of the people in my life were laid low in some form or other. I think the most was a few days. I felt nothing. And in fact, I don't know if you can talk about this. We might get this in the Q&A. I'm giving folks some time for questions here. But I felt the needle way less than other vaccines I've got in the past too. It was a smaller needle. You feel the flu shot quite a bit. And it was oh, they did it already. There you go. So what's our answer from Mr. Shattuck's group? Lots of groaning and E here. Okay, some of the students might have felt quite a few of these. All of the above. What do we think, Isabella?
So the answer is all of the above. So Mr. Shattuck's class was right. And the reason why we might experience these side effects is usually what happens when our body is learning to react to this virus. What happens is that our immune system's quickly learning to protect the body, and sometimes similar to how when our muscles are working out, they get tired and sore. So the reason that you might be experiencing these side effects, and usually they do go away quite quickly, is because it's like your immune system's training and it's learning how to protect yourself. So in that, it gets a little tired or has some side effects because of that. So now that we know that we can use the vaccine as one way to protect ourselves, what are some other ways that we might be able to protect ourselves? And before we go to the next slide, can you list off some things that maybe you know or have heard of some ways to protect yourself during this pandemic?
I mean, the big one that jumps in for me, and we can have people share in the chat as well, and you have it in the picture here, is of course a mask. And so this has been one of the most proven effective interventions used all around the world. It's been really interesting to see how this has sort of become part of the, I guess, everyday experience for so many people. Being at the University of Toronto when I was growing up, you'd see students from Korea, from China, from Japan, and they'd wear masks when they were sick. And that was just a natural part of what they did. It was very unique to us as Canadians. And so it's been amazing to see that this has been so well adopted by the overwhelming majority of people. We've got wear a mask and fist pump. Yes, fist pumps are very necessary to protecting yourself at all times, just like everybody. Hand sanitizer, if you have symptoms, get tested or stay home. Wash your hands often. This is fantastic. Oh, guys. And thanks for YouTube groups starting to come in with some chats as well. So all good interventions. What do we think? Anything that we missed there?
Yeah, you all made some very, very good points. And yeah, I could see the last one that I was going to add in, that using the tests at home. So it's really important that you help use all these measures to try and protect yourself, by wearing a mask, washing your hands, staying distance when it's hard to remain in separate areas and things like that. But it's also important to monitor yourself, and that if you are feeling sick, it's important to use tests at home, to take your temperature, and to rest. So you've all stated very, very good answers for how to best protect yourself during these times. So this, in conjunction with the vaccine, is the best way to protect yourself. So next we're going to watch a video of some super kids who are quite happy after they've gotten their vaccine to do their part to protect themselves and others around them.
Getting ready to fight COVID. All of us want to be superheroes. And the most important heroes are those that help others. This year, thousands of kids like us around the world joined the COVID-19 vaccine trial. Kid power. And when they did, they became all superheroes. To all the kids who volunteered, we'd like to say, thank you! Thank you! Thank you for sharing your superpowers of courage, trying new things,
the ability to save people,
the power to help people, helping not just yourself, but many other kids. To not be scared, be strong, super brave,
bravery, and courage.
A superhero shot, helping everybody, fight coronavirus and help others. You're helping the whole entire world. Thank you. You are all superheroes.
Thank you!
Thank you, superheroes. Thank you. You're awesome. Getting ready.
So next up is we have actually a book here on the screen. If you want to learn more about the pandemic, this was actually written by a female medical student at the University of McMaster, and she felt like there wasn't enough information for students or children to learn about the pandemic. So she wrote and illustrated, since she's also an artist, called the storybook Patty in the Pandemic. So if that's something that maybe you and your class ever want to check out or read, that's a great option for you to get more information on the pandemic. And it's a fun way to follow her along for her little adventure through her journey of the pandemic. So with that, we will open the floor to any questions that you may have.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for that. Really quick, God, those 15 minutes, that's amazing. We're going to dive in with Q&A, folks. We got a bunch of classes joining us on YouTube. Miss Wilson's class, Miss Sims. Emily, if you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, you're welcome to. But let's begin with Mr. Shatter's group, 6 through 8. You guys are really on the ball in the chat here. Come on in and Chalk River. Hi, guys.
Do you guys have any proof the vaccine actually works?
Yeah. What's our proof? How do we know the vaccine works, people?
That's a great question. So before we start even using vaccines on people, first of all, we have to figure out a formula that's going to work. So we test it in the labs for a really long time. And then we have to go and test it on certain animals to make sure that it really does work. And then we go and we do something called a clinical trial, which has multiple steps. The first step is we ask volunteers to take the vaccine, and we try to monitor to see if there are any side effects that we don't want the general population to get, but also just to make sure that if these people get that actual COVID, that the vaccine is going to protect them. And as we follow the steps of the clinical trial, we're more and more sure that the vaccine is actually effective and has very minimal side effects. So we are certain before we inject the vaccine into anybody in the general population, we really make sure that there are no side effects that could be very fatal, or just to make sure that it works for real. So absolutely, there is lots of proof that it's effective.
Yeah. What I love too is, I mean, now after we went through all these trials, we did thousands and thousands of people involved in the early trials. We proved that they were effective. We proved their efficacy and that they had very minimal side effects. Now we're at the point where a year and a bit into giving these vaccines around the world, we have billions of data points. I mean, everyone who's got a vaccine, their outcomes are tracked. You know, your ability to withstand infection is tracked. And we can see that really readily, not just locally in one place, but we can see data from around the world. So you can see how countries that have more vaccination do versus countries that have less. You can see the impact of a booster, a third shot versus 2 shots. And I mean, all that underscores this original major clinical trial that went into the vaccine development. It really is quite an incredible thing that it's happened so quickly. It's the fastest time frame between identifying a virus, producing a vaccine, and getting it out in the history of man, which is a real triumph of science and healthcare professionals and more. So great question, guys. All right, YouTube folks, if you guys want to share questions, please do feel free in the chat. We'd love to take your questions, but Mr. Shatter's class has another student right at the ready at the camera, so come on in. Hey.
Do animals have side effects?
Yeah, I've never heard that question. Great question.
Thank you for your question. That's a great one. So yes, it is possible that some animals can have side effects from the virus. Earlier on, we knew that, some cats were getting the coronavirus. And so we've also, when we're testing the virus in the labs, we monitor the animals very closely as well. So it's possible that they could experience side effects that are quite similar to humans. Maybe they will feel a little bit more tired or fatigued. Maybe they'll also have a sore arm or a leg wherever the needle was injected. And it's also possible that they could experience things that are quite similar to us. But all these side effects are monitored, and they have to go through many legal and ethical requirements to make sure that with all this testing that we're doing no harm to animals or humans. So although they could be experiencing these side effects, we always want to make sure that they're quite minimal, because we might see some similar experiences in humans as well. So we're going to try and protect those animals and humans the best that we can with our science.
I love that we get a lot of side effect questions. This is something that we found in a lot of our COVID programs in the past as well. And I mean, side effects are scary. Like, let's be honest about that. No one wants to get a shot that's a medical intervention and have something bad happen to them. And so we've seen this. We've seen that some people have mild side effects. We've seen in some cases, especially early on in the vaccine rollout, that some people had quite severe side effects. And so the entire medical community wants to understand why that happened and try to make sure that it didn't happen ever again. And if people started to exhibit those symptoms of a major side effect, that there are ways to treat them effectively effectively. So we see this when you have millions, if not billions of people starting to get an intervention. One thing that's really neat about the COVID vaccine is that its side effect level, to my knowledge, is actually quite a bit less than most vaccines. Like, it's actually significantly fewer people percentage-wise end up with anything negative happening. It's just that when you have 2 billion people getting something, pretty much inevitably you're going to have some people that have an adverse reaction in some way. And so it's really big and very important that we do so much science and trying to understand why. So great question, guys. Miss Sims class of Balmoral Drive, Senior Public School. They want to know, or Arjdeep wants to know, is the reason the vaccine was created so quickly, is it due to the fact that it's been used in the past? So this specific vaccine, or maybe this technology, I know there's been a lot of questions about how fast the vaccine was developed. So can you speak to that? Maybe was there a version of this in the past, or how did it come together?
That is a great question. So what the scientists have noticed is that COVID-19, although it's a new virus, is very, very similar to viruses we've had in the past. And so this mRNA technology has been in the works for about 20 years, even more. So although it was fast for specifically COVID-19, it's not a completely new technology. And it's probably a technology that's going to be getting used more and more and more now that we're learning more about it.
Yeah, and just on to Amelie's point, especially because this was such a large-scale virus, a lot of money and a lot of research went into developing these vaccines, and a lot of people came together in a collaborative effort to get this vaccine ready to go, and that's why it came in such a timely fashion.
It's like when we put man on the moon. I mean, this is like an international effort where thousands, hundreds of thousands of people came together. And so this is a once-in-a-century pandemic. The last time we faced something like this was the Spanish flu, way before the lifetimes of your teachers, even your grandparents necessarily, 1918, 1920 sort of region. So in 100 years ago, we faced something similar to this. And like that time, all the world's scientists and doctors came together to try and solve it. And I mean, we have been largely successful. This is, we've had a lot of loss of life. We've had a huge change to our lives, for students especially. You guys have dealt with the strangest 2 years that any students have ever had to deal with. But it's a testament to that collaborative effort around the world that we've been able to get back to as much normalcy as possible, and hopefully more to come in the not too distant future. All right, more questions, feel free on YouTube. Mr. Shattuck class, we'll come back to you live. Come on in. Hey.
How do you know animals have COVID?
Yes, good question.
That's a very good question. And it's hard to know that they have COVID unless they get tests similar to how humans do. So maybe you suspect it, maybe they seem a little bit more tired than usual. Maybe they're coughing or wheezing a little bit. But the only way that you can truly find out if they have COVID is by doing a test similar to how humans will get tests. And I know that some places around the world, in specific zoos in different areas, they were seeing that some of the animals, especially with like the cheetahs, the lions, the tigers, cats, and things like that, were all kind of getting sick around the same time. And they ended up doing some tests and they found out that they did have COVID. So similar to how we identify that we're sick, maybe, excuse me, we're having some signs and symptoms. That's a good indicator that, maybe something's going wrong. And then by using the test, that's a way that we can confirm that we have it or not.
I love this answer, and I love every time we talk about viruses in terms of people and animals. This is something that actually is going to be a big issue for us to solve as a society in the decades to come, is that we are more interconnected than ever. A lot of people in places around the world, especially where conservation is a big issue, are in contact with animals in ways that they otherwise would never have been. And so the closer animals are related to us, the more likely we are to be able to share viruses. So things like apes, monkeys, we can share pretty much every virus with them. So if a chimpanzee can get something, you can get something, and vice versa. That's how we ended up with HIV as a sort of the last big pandemic on this planet was from chimpanzees. And so it really behooves us to take care of this. It's called the One Health approach. It's something that we've seen in a lot of our broadcasts lately, is when you link human development, conservation, healthcare, and trying to understand these sorts of things and how to combat them. We really have a lot of challenges to come, but a lot of really good people on the case. So great question, guys. Mr. Shattuck, guys, you guys keep coming up. YouTubers, feel free to share questions. Don't be shy. But while you guys are keen, come on up.
So what about like the smaller countries like Yemen and like not sure how to pronounce it, but they only Burundi, which only has like 600 people fully vaccinated, and that's only 0.1% of their country.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's definitely something that us as a world, we need to help those countries that are struggling a little bit more. We definitely have to send more doses there and just more healthcare professionals in general to give the vaccine because people in Yemen and Burundi and other countries that are a bit smaller deserve as much healthcare as we do here in Canada. We're very lucky here to have gotten access to the vaccine so quickly and to have so much access to hospital beds and healthcare in general. But I know the country is doing as much as they can to send over doses to other countries who need help. But they deserve just as much the vaccine as we do.
There's no sugarcoating that. This is something that as students you guys have really seen, and I'm so glad you asked this question. This is like a real failure of the international community to this point, to the fact that countries like Canada, the US have had 3-4 doses for everyone. We've wasted millions of doses, and there's countries that have barely had any. That is something that we really need to remedy in the future. And again, kids, the fact that you guys are asking that question, be equipped to solve problems like that in the future. Especially with a global virus, the more that we make sure that everyone is on an equal footing in healthcare, the more we'll get out of this collectively. And I think that's a really important point. So thank you so much for that question. Paige in Miss Wilson's class wants to know, what does COVID do to you? Paige hasn't had COVID, so hopefully. What does COVID do?
So that's a very broad question, but I'll try my best to answer it kind of generally and then more specifically. So the thing that COVID does to you is, as we saw before with the little ball with the spikes on it, is that it's a virus. And since we knew that it came into your lungs, that's the specific area that it will attack in your body. And what happens when a virus attacks is it kind of sets up shop or finds a home and attaches to all different other cells and tissues in your body and tries to attack it and invade it so that it can survive. Because viruses are not live, so that they require your host to feed off of and live. And what happens is when COVID enters your body is because it's trying to live off of your tissues or your cells, it's going to cause a lot of effects on your body because your body is trying to attack it, but B, the virus is also trying to kind of attack back and break down. So what happens is, because it's in your lungs, we know that it's more of a respiratory problem or a respiratory virus causing you to have trouble to breathe. And because it can also circulate through other parts of your body, or there's other systemic effects, it may cause other things. And that's why you'll notice you might get a fever, or you might have body aches and pains. And this is all the reaction of your immune system trying to combat this virus. So we know that overall COVID is a respiratory virus, but since everyone can be affected a little bit differently, some people may experience other symptoms as well.
I can tell you guys, my fiance and I, we got our triple dose on the December 21st, and about the 1st, even though we're inside, we don't do anything really. We stick with masks all the time. We both managed to get it. So I had a little bit of stomach pain and then felt laid low for about a day. She was laid low for about 5 days. So even 3 doses in, 5 days, felt really weak, tired, wanted to lie down, felt like she'd been coughing, even though she hadn't been coughing. So you'll get this diversity of symptoms. We both had very different things. It's just a personal story. And of course, as we've seen, a lot of people end up with really severe health outcomes. And as we know, certainly in Canada and around the world, a lot of people have died of COVID. So it's something that, again, it underscores our need to have been so vigilant and diligent. I mixed them together, kind of fun, in facing this. And I'm glad so many students have done such a great job of that. So you guys are fantastic. Mr. Sorensen's class has a couple questions on YouTube, and then we'll come back to you guys, Mr. Shaddix. Do the human and animal vaccine have all the same, some, or none of the same ingredients? So when you're injecting an animal in an animal trial, is it the same vaccine literally as what you put in a person or not?
Yeah, so the whole point of injecting it in animals is to figure out what works and what works a little bit less. And so the end goal is to create this fantastic vaccine that we now have access to as humans. Depending on what stage of the trial we're at, we might be modifying a few things. For example, if we see that some proteins that are being created aren't really similar to COVID, which, remember, Isabella talked about how vaccines are being created and how the mRNA works, and it basically creates proteins that are similar to the actual COVID-19 virus spikes, so that the body reacts as though there was COVID in your body. So basically, what I'm trying to say is the more we work on it, the more we improve the virus to get to the point where it is now, which is now very effective. But yes, essentially, it is the same thing that we're testing on the animals and then on the humans.
Yeah, great question, guys. All right, the question that no one wants to answer or no one wants to be held to. For Mr. Sorensen's class, how long do you think COVID's going to last? When's the pandemic over? We're all ready.
Oh, that's a great question, and I don't really know if I have truly that answer for you. I think there's a lot of factors involved with the pandemic. It's a matter of getting that vaccine equity across the world, which we were talking about with Yemen or some of those other places. It's a matter of, will the virus continue to mutate at a quick rate? And when we say mutate, we kind of mean that it changes or shifts. So each time, even though it's the same origin or the same species of virus, it changes a little bit so that our body has to find new ways to learn and adapt to it. So if the virus keeps mutating, if we have trouble, getting vaccines to everyone, it might take a little bit longer for us to see or to combat COVID and have it around in this world. But I think for everyone's sake, we are wishing that it goes away as quickly as possible.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned vaccine equity. So this is the thing that a lot of scientists, epidemiologists, the people who track and try and understand pandemics like this have been saying for many, many months now, is the sooner we make sure that everyone is vaccinated, the less chance the virus has to change again. We've all been through Alpha, Delta, Omicron now. No one wants any Voldemort variants. Like, no one wants anything different coming in the future. And so the way to do that is to make sure that people are vaccinated so they're not spreading it to one another and the virus doesn't have a chance to evolve again. Now, again, we're all hoping that we get to a situation soon where maybe we end up where we live with it. We recognize that most people are vaccinated. We do as much outreach as possible to make sure people are vaccinated so that if you get it, you get something like I have where you're sick for a day, but then you're fine. I want to bring up a quick chart, actually. I think this is a really instructive thing, and it's been doing the rounds on Fantastic Scientist social media lately. So do check this out. This is our screenshot of outcomes around the globe. In Switzerland and the US in particular. Is it coming up? Oh, there it is. There we go. In terms of survival rate, if you've got your booster, if you're fully vaccinated, or if you are not vaccinated. So the very top is deaths per 100,000 people. The second one is, so if you're unvaccinated, deaths per 100,000 people. The brownish one is if you've got 2 doses, deaths per 100,000 people. And if you squint really, really closely, the green line, and sometimes there's no line at all, is if you've got 3 doses. So 3 doses seems to be the key. 99% less likely, 99 times less likely to die if you have 3 doses. And so this is something that, as we're seeing in countries that have heavy duty uptake of vaccines, like Canada, like places like Iceland, like places like Portugal, is that they're in a situation now where people get sick, but it doesn't overwhelm the healthcare system. You don't have a lot of death from it. And that might be how we end up having to end the pandemic. But we've got to make sure that everyone gets those vaccines. So great answer, ladies. And I'm glad we got that question. Mr. Shaddis class, come on back and we're going to take a few more questions. We're ripping through these. This is great. Chalk River, take us away. Hey.
How would you test an animal?
I love these animal questions. You guys are like so keen on animals. It's great. So how do you, yeah.
That's a great question. I think there's a few different ways to do it. One way that I know they do it is by taking a little bit of the blood of the animal and they check inside to see if there's any particles of the virus, any strands of DNA or RNA of the actual virus. They don't do like we have to do where we have to go wait in line for 45 minutes and give our health card and then get swabbed in the nose. But there are different ways. They just want to see if it's actually the virus or, like Isabella mentioned earlier, if it's maybe just the animal isn't feeling that great that day. But we want to ensure that the animal is actually sick before saying, oh, it has COVID.
Great question. I love the animal concern, guys. You guys are great conservationists. Come back later. All right, Mr. Sorensen's group, is there any way to help yourself when you have COVID? So if you catch COVID, God forbid, what do you do to help?
That's a really, really good question. So if you do think that you have COVID, obviously the first thing is to get tested and confirm that you have it so you know that it's not just another cold or flu, another virus. And then if you do get COVID, it's really, really important that you rest. So drinking lots of fluids, staying and taking time to let your body recover. Also, it's important that you try and stay distance from other people around you so that they also don't catch the virus, because we know that the closer in contact that you are, you have more increased risk of spreading this virus. Another good thing to do is just to monitor yourself. If you ever feel really, really sick, like you need to go to the emergency department, that's also something that you would want to make sure that you're keeping track of. But hopefully, as Jesse said, and as he showed by those charts, the more vaccines that you have, hopefully the healthier that you will stay.
Yeah. I really want to note something, actually, because I've noticed this among friends, family. You see this in terms of how people think about the virus. No one wants to think of themselves as having caught COVID. Sometimes from a shame reason, sometimes from I wasn't partying, I wasn't doing the wrong thing. Omicron is crazy infectious. I mean, it is one of the most infectious viruses in the history of mankind, as we've seen with the fact that numbers went from like a few hundred to like many thousands in like a week. And so one of the things that's really important to assume is if you start having symptoms of any kind, if you feel a cough, if you feel sniffles, do stay home. Assume that it is COVID, because it is more likely to be COVID than it is to be a cold or flu right now, because Omicron is so infectious and COVID is so infectious. And so I know none of us want to think we have COVID. Treat it as if you have it. If you have any symptoms, get tested if you can. Stay away from people if you can. I know that it's been a long slog for all of us through this, and I know no one wants to stay home from school, but those sort of things will help keep your classmates safe. They'll help keep people around you safe, and it's really, really important. So, great question, guys. All right, 2 more questions, and then we will wrap up from there. 3 more, actually. We've got 2 more on YouTube, and we'll go back to Mr. Shattuck for one. Jaden in Miss Wilson's class wants to know if the vaccine is a living thing. So when it's going into you, is something alive crawling in there or not?
That's a great question. No, it's not living. When we're not either injecting straight COVID virus in your bloodstream, that's not at all what the goal of this particular vaccine is. Although I have to mention some other vaccines for other viruses do include a little bit of the virus, just so that your body can fight it. But in this particular vaccine for COVID-19, like Isabella mentioned earlier, it's mRNA. mRNA, the best way to describe it, it's what creates the protein. It's like if you had to follow a blueprint to create the protein, that is what it is, the blueprint. So what we're injecting is the blueprint of the COVID-19 spikes, which are the little proteins around the virus that tell your body, oh, it's COVID. So by inserting the mRNA, your body can create its own COVID-19 spikes. And so your immune system is like, okay, we gotta go, we gotta fight this. And by doing that, then creates immunity and is ready for the actual COVID-19 vaccine if you unfortunately have to have it.
Yeah, I love this. And, mRNA is something that's been in the news a lot over the last 2 years. Again, this is a technology that had been in development for many, many years, and we did roll out these vaccines in a fairly quick period of time. Not quicker than other vaccines. We did all the typical trials that we would normally do. We did them with even more people. There's more impetus around the world to make sure this happened. mRNA is a really, really neat technology. A lot of doctors have been talking about the fact that this is like game changer for other viruses, other problems in the future. It's a really nimble technology that allows us to fight things in a really targeted way, faster than we had ever before, which is really, really cool. So I'm glad we got that in. I actually have a quick question because I have the opportunity and no one can stop me. So I don't know if we know this. So when you get a vaccine and you have side effects, Mr. Shattuck's class, a lot of them apparently had some unfortunate side effects from the vaccine. Does your response to the vaccine, like if you are laid low for a couple of days, is that in any way related to how you would have fared if you had gotten the virus? Like basically, would you have had a more severe outcome getting the virus if you're the sort of person that had a really difficult time with the shot? Or is there any knowledge on that whatsoever? I've just always been curious about that.
That's a great question. And I think it does vary from person to person. We know that from a response perspective, your body is responding, doing that training. You've got the coach in there. It's like you're working out your muscles. So you are experiencing those side effects. So some people have experienced there have been some people who actually had COVID first before even the vaccine was available. And when they got the vaccine, they responded with quite some heavy side effects, because their body had kind of, oh no, I've seen this virus before. I know what I need to do. And kind of their body's gone into hyperdrive. And then there's also been some other people who have had the vaccines and, maybe kind of had a bit more of a side effect from having the vaccines first, but then maybe didn't have so many side effects when they finally actually got the virus. So I'm not sure if the side effects from the vaccines is a true indicator of how your body would respond to the virus. But like just how you and your fiance had different symptoms from actually experiencing the virus, everyone can experience kind of different side effects from the vaccine.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that some of the sort of side effects that you get are your body responding to it in a really aggressive way. So things like fevers. Fevers aren't typically caused by the infectious agent. It's your body trying to cook the thing that's inside you. It's your body literally trying to get so hot that your body can survive it, but the thing that's inside you can't, which is super cool. And also, this is my weird segue of the day, and I promise we'll go back to COVID in a second. Animals that don't have the power to regulate their body temperature, so we're warm-blooded, we can get ourselves hotter or cooler. Things like lizards, which rely on the sun, they'll do behavioral fevers. So if a lizard gets sick, it'll go lie in the sun for longer periods of time than it normally would to get much hotter to cook the thing inside it, which is super cool. And that's my nerdy zoologist take of the day. All right, Mr. Sorensen's class, and then we'll come back to Shattuck to wrap up. They want to know, can you get Delta and Omicron at the same time? Hopefully not. I don't know.
That's a great question. It would be very unfortunate if you did. I think, as Jesse mentioned earlier, Omicron is a lot more infectious. So you're a lot more likely to get Omicron. We do know, unfortunately, you could get Delta and then Omicron. So just because you've gotten COVID once doesn't mean you're never going to get it again, which kind of sucks. But that's why we do everything to protect ourselves. I don't know if Isabella wants to add anything to that answer.
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, because the viruses are a little bit different because they've evolved and mutated, it is possible to get both. But hopefully, you have been vaccinated by then, or your body knows how to respond a little bit differently, so that hopefully your symptoms that you experience won't be as bad the second time around.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember when Omicron was really taking off, people were wondering how it was going to differ. Vaccines provided better protection against it than previous infections. So, of course, if you've been infected before, your body has faced that sort of virus before. So people that had Delta and then got Omicron, they got sicker, basically, or were more likely to get it than if they'd been vaccinated and then got Omicron. So again, it was a different thing that your body was facing, but vaccines provided a better level of protection in a lot of ways. It was really, again, they're amazing vaccines. They're really, really great. Great question, guys. One more from Mr. Shattuck, and then we'll highlight some resources where folks can learn more. Come on in and Chalk River. Hi.
Why does Omicron spread faster than Delta?
Yeah.
So that's a really good question. And to make it a little bit more simpler, viruses have different strengths, so how strong the virus impacts your body, but then they also have different levels of transmission, or how easily it is to infect your body. So Omicron has one of those indicators that make it super easy to spread from one person to another, but they don't have as much strength or virulence, it's called, which will cause as much of an effect in your body. So although it is much more infectious and can spread from person to person much more quicker, it's not as strong as a virus. So that's why people aren't experiencing as many of the more serious symptoms with this virus. Whereas Delta did not spread as quickly, but it had a stronger virulence, which made people react stronger to it.
Yeah. And I mean, all of these are really infectious. Even the original strain of COVID is crazy infectious. Compared to something like a flu or something like a cold, these are some of the more infectious viruses ever. I think the only thing that tops Omicron, I could be wrong with this, is measles ever. Measles is the most infectious virus. If someone has measles, everybody around them gets measles, which is why it's so important to be vaccinated against measles, and that's how you prevent outbreaks. So again, great questions, guys. You guys are covering so much. I want to encourage you to learn more about some of the stuff that you guys can take home with you. So first and foremost, if you're going to go on social media to look into COVID, find reputable sources, find doctors, find scientists, find healthcare providers. I know a lot of us here in Ontario, we've got a big Ontario audience today. You might have seen Isaac Bogosh on the news. So again, he's an epidemiologist. He's at University Health Network in Toronto, really reputable scientist. So the stuff that he says is great. If you look at top doctors of Canada, Theresa Tam, these are people that know their stuff, that done a really, really good job of providing accurate, timely healthcare information. So those are the people that are important to listen to if you're going to go on social media or go on the news. One other thing, you highlighted Emily Isabella, Patty in the Pandemic, for our younger audience today. If you guys want to check out that book, a really, really great resource. One book that I read, and then a resource that's fantastic on YouTube. We've got Kyrgyzstan, how the immune system actually works. Some of our older kids, really, really cool if we want to dive into that. Isabella, sorry for cutting off your face there with the banner. So really, really neat resources out there, and I can get all those to you after the fact as well. One of the questions we got from classes, and I want to leave with this idea of vaccine equity. We want to make sure the world gets vaccinated. One of the coolest things that's happened in the last few months that everyone should check out is Corbavax. So this was a Texas Children's Hospital working with groups around the world, basically a free open source vaccine. Now, companies develop these vaccines and they wanted to make money off it, and that does make sense. You know, they did a lot of work and research and development. What Corbavax is a free vaccine. Hey, any other group in the world, you can take our blueprint for making this vaccine, make it, roll it out. We're seeing this across India, across Southeast Asia, and more. So it's been really, really special. This is going to be one of the more amazing stories in the years to come, is how this got developed. So I encourage all our classes to check this out. Isabella and Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there one sort of final message that people should take away about the COVID-19 vaccine and the pandemic in general? Something to leave with?
I think just in general, I know that sometimes it's scary to think about vaccines. I know we hear a little bit of everything, but the fact of the matter is they're safe, they're effective, and we're really trying to help people by giving them out. So if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, I really, really suggest that you do. It's going to help you, it's going to help the people around you, and you're just going to be more protected against the virus. And help the pandemic end faster, too. It's super important.
And if you're nervous too, you can talk to your local doctor. I mean, a lot of us have a family doctor, and a lot of people haven't actually gone to their family doctor to talk about this. If you want that sort of personal conversation, that goes a really long way. And again, a lot of people are nervous for a wide variety of reasons. That is okay. It's important to learn as much as you can. And it's important to get the best information. So it's good to find the people that are going to provide that to you, and hopefully, as you said, make this a better world in the months to come. Isabella, anything to add before we wrap up?
I think that's it. Emily covered it very well.
Awesome. Well, ladies, thank you so much to all our classes on YouTube. Thank you guys for all joining in. Mr. Shattuck, I'm going to bring you guys in to say a big thank you and farewell, and we'll wrap from there. Thank you, Mr. Shattuck class.